We are so glad to be here with you guys. We are honored and privileged to have had this invitation and to be with you.
Thank you so much. We're getting organized here. What an honor to be here. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Just to explain a little bit about the video you just saw. Two of the guys on there are our son-in-laws, Drew and Nick. And I think Marcia just mentioned Drew and Stephanie, our oldest daughter and son-in-law. They just finished qualification for Emerald this year. And one of their legs was our middle daughter, Stacy and Nick. They qualified as new platinums. And so we're all about being here with the Victor family and the Victor team and
the Victor legacy.
The Victor legacy and the Dutt legacy and all the people we stand on their shoulders, you know, to offer this opportunity for us. But what we did, and we'll talk more about our business, how it's a family legacy and what we're building tonight too. But just to explain all that, what was all that stuff? You know, what's cool is the business has kept us young because you're always working with young people. We have vision for our life. You know, a lot of people our age are ready to hang it up. They're just, you know, buying their years, and we're just getting started as far as we're concerned. And we're excited about the next 30 years plus. And so, but because of that, we just have a young spirit, a young heart, and we do young, fun things. And so, 4 years ago, I think it was. Yeah, 4 years ago, I believe it was. Got a call from a friend who was going to Machu Picchu and he said, "I'd like for you to go on a trip with us," you know. And I said, "If you're going, I'm going." And he goes, "Okay." And he starts telling me about it. And he said, "Now you're going to have to get in shape." Because obviously I was in the round shape. That was the only shape I was in, okay? And he said, "You're going to have to get in shape." I said, "Okay, no problem." And he said, "Because we're going to be hiking." I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, I hadn't hiked any further than the golf cart over into the woods looking for my ball in years, okay?" And he said, "We'll be camping for 4 days." And I was thinking, okay, I think the last time I camped was when I was about 13 or 14 in my neighbor's backyard. But I'm like, if you're going, I'm going. And so he's telling me about it, and we're going to hike and all this stuff. And he said, "We're going to Machu Picchu." And I said, "Fine." And he goes, and so he gets through. He said, "You in?" I said, "Sure, yeah, I'm in." And I said, "By the way," I said, "where's Machu Picchu?" And he goes, "In Peru." And I was like, "Peru?" I thought it was maybe in South Carolina or something. Okay, all right, you know, because we're from North Carolina. And so he started laughing, and I said, "Hey, I'm in." And he said, "Can you take Drew and Nick?" And because he was taking his son, he said, "I think they'd have a good time together." And I said, "Yeah, it'd be great." And so we did that, and it was 4 days of hiking and camping. And Machu Picchu, if you don't know, is in Peru, and it's one of the seven wonders of the world, whatever. It was built in 1400. And it was the summer resort for the Inca king, basically. And they built it in the mountains. And we started out at 6,000 feet. And you got to realize we live in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is about 300 feet above sea level. And the other part of the year, we're at our beach home, which is 17 feet above sea level. Okay, so starting out at 6,000 was higher than we had been anyway, you know. And so North Carolina mountains, I think they top out about 3,000 or 4,000 feet. And so started out at 6,000 feet. We hiked up to 12,800 over the first couple of days. In fact, that second day was a bear. It was just, you know, I could talk all night about that. But we went to that, and then we got to that height, and it was such a task, okay? I had to lose some weight. And so Renata I had to work out on the stair stepper to get in shape because this is a lot of hiking. And so Renata bought me this oxygen mask that restricts the flow of oxygen. And so you could crank it up to like 15,000 feet, or 13,000, but you had to work up to it. Well, you know how we are in the business, just jump in and go for it. So I just cranked it up to 13,000 feet right at the start. And so I was like, like that, sucking when it builds your lungs up. So that second day, we went from 6,000 feet to 12,800. And when we got there, Drew and Nick were already up there, and Drew had his iPhone. And I'm just like coming up, and he finally, and I get there, and I go, "Machu Picchu." And he started laughing. He said, "We aren't there yet." I was so tired I was delirious, okay? We had not even got to the city yet. And he goes, and I was like, oh God, he said, that's 2 days from now. and so we went back down, we hiked back down because you had to get under 11,000 feet to sleep. And that night the guide, he said, you guys are doing really good. He said, we have about 2 more days of hiking. And I'm just like, oh gosh, I was like a 5-year-old. I just wanted to call Mama and have her come rescue me, And he said, but tomorrow morning we'll start right back out of the camp and go right back up over another ridge. And I was like, So next morning we went back up over 10,000 feet, 11,000, something like that, and then went back down to 8,800. And we got to Machu Picchu, and it was phenomenal. It was memories we'll always have. We get into Machu Picchu, and there's these people that come up on come up as tourists on this train with a glass top, and they're walking around with a latte and just looking at everything. And we're looking at all these weak civilians that didn't make the hike. We hadn't had a bath or shaved in 4 days, and we were a lot of weak people, and stuff like that. So, that was that. And then the next year had the opportunity to go with some of the same guys, and we, rafted through the Grand Canyon for 5 days and hiked. And that was one of the coolest things ever. And, so the last day, the 4th day, we were hitting rapids that were just like crazy. And I said, I asked the guy on the boat, I said, what class rapids are these? And he was like, well, these are probably 8s. And I was like, 8? I didn't think they even got higher than 5. He said, that's because you're from North Carolina. He said, they go higher. He said, wait till tomorrow. I said, they're worse than this? He said, oh, tomorrow I have to pull over to the side and figure out where we're going to go because these scare the bleep out of me. Okay. And I'm like, oh my goodness, and so the next day for sure we would go, and it was a 16-foot raft with 8 guys in it in front of us, and then our raft, and they would go over the fall and we would totally lose sight of them. That's how fast it dropped off. And we'd be going, he said, now, sometime today you're going to turn over. It's just inevitable. Somebody will. And we're thinking, great. Unfortunately, nobody did, but they had these stirrups you put your feet in. And he said, when we get to the raft, he would say, paddle. 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 Okay. And so we're just going like this, and we're leaning in, and we're like, ah! And we'd go over, and the water, it was like 110 degrees, but the water was 45 degrees. And so you would go over, and it would hit, and the water would come completely over the raft. And you're just like, wow! We'd come out of it hollering and everything. And so it was a rush. It was awesome. But then we had an 8.5-mile hike out of the canyon up the South Rim. And, the year before I'd done Machu Picchu. So I'd trained for that one. But this one I was like, 8 miles, big deal. I did Machu Picchu. So I had not really trained all year, okay? And eating a few donuts just to make for sure I got back what I had lost, But I lost like 33 pounds to train for Machu Picchu. So we start hiking the Grand Canyon, and it was 130 degrees, and there was no shade. It was just constant incline. We got about halfway up, about 3.5 miles up, and I just looked up and saw the rim, and I don't know if I've ever been that frustrated in my life, but I just learned. I said, okay, just take one step after the next, things I learned in the business, and don't look at the rim anymore. I drank 8 bottles of perfect water that day and never had to pee because I sweated it all out. Okay. And so it was torture. And so, by the time I got through with that one, I was so wiped out that I didn't work out for the next year and a half. Okay. And so I put some of this back on. So now I'm on my program, not to say you need to plan another trip. So anyway, I bought new clothes recently and asked them, I said, can I get the waistbands to have elastic in them so I can just work with my lifestyle that goes in and out, so, anyway, so I wanted to explain that. We'll get into our story, everything, but we just wanted to say this, that when we got the email from Steve and Marcia and Joe and Kelly about coming and speaking here, we were floored because we look up to and respect Jody and Kathy more than you can imagine. We didn't really have a chance to get to know them because we're coming in different lines of sponsorship. Actually, we're in their downline, but we're so far in depth, it was like, what do we matter? And it just shows how much they're givers to not only just their organization, but the whole world of Amway. through the IBOI board and the responsibility they take. And we didn't understand that fully until we were honored to serve on the board the first time and just really saw them in action and the things they do behind the scenes. And I know y'all hear things about them all the time, and people, are always talking about how much they appreciate them, and everybody does. But I'll just tell you personally, from us, they have done so much for us individually and personally, and they didn't have to. They've just been there for us, just like they are for anybody who has need, and we could never repay them for all that they've done for us. So we love them. So go ahead, baby. I've talked the whole time. Go ahead.
Well, again, we appreciate what Jody and Kathy have done. We appreciate the legacy that they have built, because it's just been an example for us and for our kids of what they can have and what we're doing together as a family. And, it's the same thing that you guys are working for, that the same things that you want to build for your families. And it's what we saw in the very beginning, for the business, and we talked about it when we really didn't even really understand it. But no one in our upline up to Jody and Kathy had built a legacy, and so we didn't even really understand it, but we always talked about it. We talked about our children being in business with us one day, and to just have this example of what they've done is phenomenal. And
I think the reason we started talking about having our children follow us because we fell in love with the business so much.
Yeah.
And coming out of our backgrounds, I was in automobile sales, new car sales and management. Renata worked with Sheraton Hotel Reservation Corporation, and when we got in this environment of the business and people pulling for each other and people encouraging each other and people guarding their words and speaking life and speaking opportunistic and optimistic about things versus murmuring and gossiping and putting people down and stuff, it was such such a contrast to what we were in every day that we were just like, we fell in love with it, and we were like, we want our kids to do this one day. And at that point, we had not seen anybody at that point who had ever built a legacy, where their kids came along behind them and built it, because we were just young in the business. We were just brand new. When we got started, we were 24 years old, and, we've just learned things. And tonight, we're going to tell our story so you know us a little better. And then tomorrow, I'm really excited about sharing things that we've actually learned over the past 35 years or so, building our business and being diamonds, over, almost 3 decades now. And I don't take that lightly. I don't claim to be, some brilliant Superman, super gifted. We just poured our heart and our life into it. And, you'll hear through our story, we'll give you hope that if we can do it, anybody can. And you hear that a lot of times, and I think a lot of people just say it, but you'll know by the time we get through tonight.
So many times as we were building our business, and even today, but I remember when we were working so hard to go platinum, I had this idea in my head that I had to be perfect to go platinum and emerald and diamond. And you will see tonight as we talk to you about our story that you do not have to be perfect. And, it's just something that you're always working on. It's something that you're always working to become better, to be able to improve yourself and just become better people.
Even after diamond.
Amen.
Doesn't mean you're perfect and you got it all figured out at that point. When you're through learning, you're through. We still read books and study and listen to audios and to improve ourselves and to be better leaders for our family and better leaders for our business and to be a blessing. And that's what's so cool. They say most people don't, over 50% of the people, statistics say, don't even read a book once they graduate from school. And if it is a book, it's a pleasure book. It's not a self-help book to help them in any area of becoming better. And that's what this business puts you in an arena of people who are trying to help themselves become better so they can accomplish something with their life. And so I love that every quarter you've basically got a event, a function that you're working towards. You know, even at Diamond, you want to bring something fresh and new, and you want to be cutting edge, you know, so you're not just talking about what you did, but something that's current right now. And so it keeps you sharp. And I think that's one of the things that keeps you young, because a vision and a purpose and something you want to accomplish with your life. And that's what we didn't have, or never even heard anybody had that before. You know, one of the things I want to mention too is with our children building the business now, we're so thankful and it's so much fun. And we want to be encouragement to you tonight, because maybe your children may even be grown and they're not doing the business now, but you can still talk to people in your organization about building a legacy type business, and your children could always come back and want to build it also. In fact, just last couple of weeks in Raleigh, we have a meeting, and people that are cross-line organization that are friends of ours tie into our Raleigh meeting there that our son-in-law Drew does. And there was a lady there, and she was recognized as a new silver, and she'd been in the business for over 20 years. And she had life happen and things go on, but she said, I just always renewed. I knew this was what, you know, is the best thing, so why quit? And she had a guy that had been in their business for 20 years she's in Raleigh, and the guy was in her business out in Colorado. And his daughter had grown up, or son or somebody, and said, hey, we want to build the business now. And so it got them re-engaged, working at the business together, and said they had always bought the audios, they had always read the books, they had attended the conferences and stuff for 20 plus years, but never really engaged in building the business until it clicked. And their son or daughter said, I want to build the business. So they said, let's do it. And so in 6 months, they qualified silver and are in platinum qualification. And it was a 20-year gap there that they really had just been part of the team, but knew it was the right thing. But when their time came, they clicked. And I think that just gives hope to anybody, because, you know, our business didn't take off as fast as we wanted it to. And you'll hear it in our story tonight. But I just want to encourage you that it's not too late. It's never too late. You know, you haven't been in too long for it to happen. You're not too old for it to happen. You know, all things are possible for those that believe. And so the thing is we just want to be encouragement to you tonight. And also, I wanted to come from a standpoint of where our kids, like I said, are building it, and they wanted to earn their own respect. Just like Stephen Marsh and Joe and Kelly, you know, they want to earn their own respect. They're just not tailing off of Jody and Kathy's success, just like Jody wanted to earn his own respect with his dad that went ahead of him. And I think everybody wants to earn their own respect. And so sometimes people will look at our kids and go, well, they've got an advantage because they're Danny and Renata's kids and they've grown up around the diamond ship and stuff like that. But they wanted to earn their respect. And so they're doing that. What's cool is I've probably done less for Drew than I've done for a lot of other legs, because I didn't want him to be weak. I wanted him to be a strong leader, and I knew he had to learn it, you know, by doing things on his own. Same with Nick. And, you know, for those of you that don't have a lineage of people that were in the business, then we can relate to you, because we had nobody in our family who had been in the business before. In fact, our family was very skeptical and very pessimistic about the business just because of hearsay. And so we broke the mindset there, you know, with our lineage and our family, and started our business and stuck with it, even though they didn't support or understand what we were doing. And now it's created a legacy for our family that all our kids are involved. And it's so fun to be able to talk every day about our business and where we're going and what we're doing together. And so I just want to be encouragement to you that whatever your situation is in, where you're coming from, or however long you've been in the business, that you can make a difference, not only in your families, but families to come. And so as we talk about our family and our family building the business together tonight, I want you to see that this is something that you could point to people in your organization, so that they could see they can have a long-term business and a business that could be passed on from one generation to the next to keep it going. And really, I see it as the modern day way of wealth building. Like, you know, you have the Rockefellers and all these people back in the long ago, and they're, you know, John D. Rockefeller's great grandkids are still benefiting off of what he did. You know, and for us to be high school push-outs and to create a legacy that can be something for our great-great-great-grandkids is pretty amazing, of the business that we have, the offering that we have through this. So one of our things when we first went to our first conference, one of the things that I started realizing by listening to these audios and picked up pretty quick is that it's a way to validate and record what your beliefs are, what you stood for, what your life was about, your work ethic, and it can be memorialized so that generations from now, your great-great-great-grandkids can know what you stood for and what you believed in. And think about that. Where else can you do that? I sure couldn't do anything at the car lot that my great-great-great-grandkids were going to know about, And I saw something because I would hear audios that were made 10 years before we got in, and I was still listening to them and learning from them. And I realized, my goodness, and now there's some of those audios that I've listened to for 30 years. And that's the way that these audios will be when you get the opportunity to tell your story. Then just remember, it's not just your story to the crowd, but it's your story to generations of people coming behind you. And that's the kind of influence and the kind of impact you can make. And that was one of the things that's way more than money to me, because everybody wants your life to have significance, right? And to mean something. And I think that's why you're here tonight, because you saw something about this business that's just different. It wasn't just the money. Everybody gets in to make more money. But once you get around the team, you start realizing the values of the team and the atmosphere and the place to raise your children in this environment and stuff and really make a difference that's going to outlive you. And so, go ahead.
Well, I want to congratulate you for being here also, because, you're sitting in here because someone saw something special in you. Yep. I took it as such a privilege that, number one, I saw something about this business that was special. I saw the dream, and that's what you guys have done. And because tons of people, the very same night that you saw the business for the first time, hundreds and thousands of people saw the business at the same time.
Same night.
At the same night.
Not at the same
Not
meeting.
at the same time. But,
yeah.
Not
That'd
at the same meeting.
That'd be a pretty big house meeting if there was 100,000 people at it. But, okay.
But they saw the business, at the
same night.
You know what I mean. So they saw the business then, and they didn't see the dream. They didn't see what this business could provide. And I just think it's such an honor, number one, that we saw it. Number one, that someone offered it to us. And number one, that it gave me us the opportunity to be able to build a business and work on something together and with a family. And, and that's how we came into the business. Like you said, we were 24 years old, and actually we were 24 and 25. I'm the 25, and he always says she's a cougar, but not really. That's not really the definition of a cougar, but anyway.
Got me a cougar. Okay.
But I had just had Stephanie. She was 3 months old. I was going to have to go back to work. I worked for Sheraton Worldwide Reservations, and we only took calls from travel agents. How long has anyone in here recently made a reservation for a hotel through a travel agent? My job was gone. It would have been obsolete if I had stayed in that industry. I enjoyed it. I could have traveled everywhere, but because Danny was in car sales, he wouldn't take a vacation because he would have missed so many sales and everything. Could have been to Hawaii before then because I could have gone free. Paid my way there, but, stayed in Hawaii free. But couldn't do that because he would have lost too much income. But we always knew he was always looking for something else to do because he knew that so much depended on his income. But, the economy, the dealership, the owner of the dealership would control that. And so he was always looking for a way to bring me home and for him to do something else because he hated car sales. Because, let's be honest, a Christian car salesman is an oxymoron. So
it's like a jumbo shrimp, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But let's back up just a second here. We get rolling and talking and everything, but just so you know, we we grew up in the same neighborhood, right down the street from each other. I tell people all the time we were just neighbors. We weren't cousins. Okay, all right, and so we became honeys when we were in the 7th and 8th grade that summer, and actually the 8th grade, and you were going into the 9th grade. Mm-hmm. And so we became honeys, and that's when I got old enough to notice, girls in bathing suits and stuff like that. Before that, I was just interested in bugs and ball and stuff like that. Okay, but she caught my eye, and so then I was just enamored with her, infatuated with her, whatever you want to call it. But I thought she was the prettiest thing in the world, and still think that, And so then she goes to high school, and I'm back in middle school in 8th grade, and she's in 9th grade, and she saw the seniors. And she dumped me like a bad habit, I'm telling you, okay? Broke my little heart, and y'all should feel really sorry for me, okay? And she treated me horrible through high school, and I would sit in algebra class next to her, and I would just stare at her. I was just like, I was like, you didn't call it a stalker back then. Today it would be a stalker, but I was definitely a stalker, Thought she was the prettiest thing in the world, but then she graduated and went to college. And we dated on and off through high school, never more than over 6 months. But we would always come back to each other. And then when she went to college, she realized what a good thing she had turned down, And so, I tell people I chased her all the way through high school, and then she finally caught me. Okay, but and so we got married, and we were just babes, and young. 19 and 20 years old, and that's why I tell everybody I got me a cougar, or she got me. She robbed the cradle, but life was fun. When we started out, we got us a 12 by 65 foot house trailer. That's where we lived. That was counting the trailer hitch. Okay, all right, and that's what we lived in. And we built her dad and I built a deck on the side of the trailer with an oak tree coming out of the middle of it, and we had a little Weber grill up there, on the little deck. And I'm telling you, we were the talk of the trailer park. We were, people would ride by and they would just go, how do they do it? And I would just wave to all the little people riding by, okay? And so, I just got this uneasy feeling about living in a house trailer. I'm not putting you down if you live in one. You can be delivered from that, okay? But, cause we were, okay? All right. But I remember, she'd put the washing machine on the spin cycle and the whole trailer would just start shaking, and it was like, this was a deluxe model, had underpinning and everything, but it still, it had shag carpet and the doors, the gaps under the doors were about this big so you could open it with a shag carpet. But I thought it was just so it could get good ventilation, so if it caught on fire, it could burn up real fast, anyway, but I just had this uneasy feeling going to bed at night with something with a trailer hitch on it. I was afraid we were going to wake up in Mississippi or something one morning, So one day coming home from work, I swung through our neighborhood where our parents lived to see them real quick, and there was a lady who had put a for sale sign in her yard, for sale by owner, and, we were always looking for deals, okay? And so I pulled in and I saw the house, and this lady who was older couldn't really take care of it. She had a dog that had a bladder problem, and so it had a little smell to it, but I figured a little paint, new carpet, that'll change things, And so I negotiated and made a deal. I said, I'll take it. And so I called her up and I said, hey, come on down to Mom and Dad. She says, for what? I said, I just bought us a house. And I thought she was going to say, my man, okay, because, but she drove up in the driveway and I was standing there right proud, and she just had this look on her face, and it's just like, so this is it, and I was like, oh my goodness, because she had a bigger dream than I had. I just thought if we could just get back to the neighborhood that we grew up in, that was our lot in life. And that's where my mentality, that's where I was mentally, when we started our business. It was just like, because we were talking that we don't remember but one guy that ever moved up in financial status or business or job or whatever and moved out of the neighborhood. Everybody was the same. They had settled for right there, and everybody thought he was just rich because he had, moved up and moved out of the neighborhood. And our church that we grew up in, we've thought about it, and I don't even know a single person that was self-employed in the church. And so it was just good people, but just a mediocre employee mentality. That they were trying to live within their means, but never thinking about stretching the means, And that's when we got in the business. I heard a guy talking who was a financial planner who had built the business to diamond, and he was very successful. And he said, most people are trying to live within their income circle. He said, which is okay. He said, but why not just expand your income circle? And so many people are talking about cut back to get out of debt and stuff like this, and not bad financial advice to get out of debt. However, they don't offer anything to expand your income circle. So as you cut back, now you're just stuck right there from now on. And if you don't do anything different and your income doesn't go up, then how are you going to ever get better in life? And so when we got started in the business, it was a total mindset change for us, because we laugh at some of the things that we grew up, taught by our parents, who are great parents, but they just had limited thinking. My dad turned 90 2 weeks ago, and he still lives in the same house. I love him. He still lives in the same house that they built when I was 10 months old. In fact, it's still got, as far as I know, the same furniture, okay? My mom used to cover the furniture every few years, and she died 18 years ago, and it's still the same furniture that was covered when she died, and the same thing, nothing's changed. And it was just the mentality. He grew up as a depression child, and so anything they just had this mindset of holding on to because of a fear that they may not have something one day.
And when you have that mindset, you don't have a giving mindset. You don't feel like you can, maybe you see someone with a need and you think, oh, I should do something for them. But then you're taught, hang on to it. And so you're not able to feel the freedom to give. And how much fun is it to give?
We're raised in the South, and so down there, instead of giving to help somebody, they just say, bless their heart. Oh, they're so broke. Bless their heart. We'll do something about it. Help them out, but you can't do that, And we were taught to give, but it was not giving cheerfully. It was giving almost like it was a payment or an obligation because it was the thing to do. Not understanding that that's the way to start the flow, that you can't, that if you give, it'll be given back to you, pressed down, shaken together, and running over. We were never taught that. We were taught, hold on to what you got, put it in a can and sit on the can, right? Okay. And that, because it may be all you have. And that's a fear mentality to go through life with, that I may not have this. And what we learned by getting around the team is an abundance mentality and thinking bigger. And, we were tell them about your bathtub.
Well, this is a little embarrassing to tell, but I don't know if any of you were raised like this or not, but when my mom would run the tub for water for my brother and I to take a bath in, and when we were really little, we took a bath together, but she put that much water to take a bath in.
About 3 inches.
About 3 inches, just as it went up to the back of the tub.
Right to the ring in the tub.
Yeah. So then when we would get out, she would get in. And then my dad would get in. So we took a bath in the same water. And what she probably didn't realize, my brother and I would pee in that water all the time. So it was pretty gross.
My family had abundance mentality because they would drain it out and everybody would get 3 inches of water to take a bath in, okay?
And I can remember when we would have droughts, and the water there was a shortage on water. Mind you, we had our own wells. They were like, okay, they would say on TV or what, you don't need to take showers. You should take baths because it uses less water. And I'm like, there is no way that a shower is less water than a bath, because I knew how much we put in a bathtub. It never occurred to me that people would put that much water in their bathtub. So
right, they fill the tub up. It was like my dad. He told me, he said he put a brick in the back of the toilet tank, so it would raise the water level, so the float would kick in and it would save water, on each flush.
Again, we had our own
but we had
wells.
well water. And so it was there's plenty of water, but he just heard that's how you conserve water. Well, who cares if you conserve water if there's plenty of it, right? And see, when we get abundance mentality about money and about all things, it should be to the point that, how many of us think when you turn on the spigot, now I'm wasting water, right? And see, if we get a mindset that there's always plenty of money out there, and if we're trusting the Lord and we're doing the right things, the abundance is going to come. And we can have abundance mentality to have more to give, to more to sow, more to share, and it just keeps coming back, and the tank keeps filling up. So,
we got to talk fast.
All right. So anyway, I'll tell you another quick story, and you may sit there and go, well, what does this got to do with the business? Here's what we want to do, because some of you may relate to coming from backgrounds like this. Maybe not the tank, the brick in the toilet. Okay. All right. But maybe there were things that have limited your thinking about what can happen for you. And this is where we have to all break down these mental things that we've been taught all our life and retrain our mind to understand all things are possible. And really, it's okay to prosper. Because so many people wonder if it's okay to prosper, because people will say, the thing about it is people will go to work and they've never turned down a pay raise. Because, oh, boss, I can't take that because that would make me materialistic if I made that kind of money. The people will do that. But then if you make a certain amount of money, people will go, well, they're just materialistic because they've got nicer cars or nicer houses, things like this. And it's always right above the line of where they're making. Right? Think about that. See, I remember the first night I went to a meeting. It was a house meeting, and Larry and Pam Winters, by the way, are our sponsors. They're Double Diamonds, and we've been in business with them now for over 30 years. And he had to work on my thought process so much. In fact, I remember I was working at the dealership, and he came and got a job there, and we started talking, and after a couple of weeks, we got to know each other, had a lot of common interests. A lot of the guys I worked with, I didn't want to spend any time with them. And so Larry and I just kind of hit it off. And I told him that Renata had had our first daughter, Stephanie, and she was 3 months old. And we were just trying to figure out how to bring her home. And he said, have you ever thought about having a business of your own? Well, the only thing I knew at that point was the car business, because my daddy was in car sales for 37 years, and I just kind of grew up around it. And so I don't have the money to start a car lot, even a used car lot or anything like that. He goes, well, I can introduce you to some guys that I've been learning from, that they have a home-based business and are financially independent. And I had never even heard that word before, financially independent. I didn't know, what it was. You got to realize that this was back in the Stone Age, and it wasn't the internet. We didn't have mobile phones. In fact, all the phones were hooked on the wall, and high tech was if you had a long cord that you could pick it up. People would pick the phone up. Hey, man, how you doing? They would walk across the room, and they'd go over there and sit in the recliner and be talking on the phone. The phone was over their wall, and I would just go, that is awesome, okay? Because my parents were too tight to buy the long cord. You had to stand right there next to the wall the whole night, And so the thing is that we had such a mind shift to grow that we had to make. And so Larry was as broke as you can get, okay? In fact, we were well better off than he was, because I had stable income and had not gotten ourselves in such credit card debt and all this stuff. And but he still had already been learning about 3.5 years before through the business before we got started. And I remember he came to work at the dealership. One day we go to Burger King, go through the drive-thru to get something to eat, and they had a special at that time. It was like 3 burgers for $1 or something. And I was, oh man, that's a lot of bulk for the money. That's all I was looking, the most for the money. And he orders a Whopper. And I'm like, a Whopper, dude, you could get 3 hamburgers for $1, and you're paying $1.49 for one. He goes, Danny, abundance mentality. I go for quality, okay? And so
at Burger King,
that was where our thinking was. Abundance mentality was buying a Whopper, okay? He had to straighten me out on it, In fact, I remember as we were coming up through the business, a guy who was already financially independent, wealthy, got in our downline, and so he said, hey, let's go down. I got a condo down at the coast. He said, I got some friends down there. Let's go talk to them. And I said, okay, let's go. So we go down there, and I'm excited because this guy's got more money than I ever dreamed of. We're riding in his Mercedes, and he's got cashmere coat and elephant skin cowboy boots, I mean, this guy was reeking with money, but he's a nice guy. And it was like, he was older than me, and he was like kind of teaching the kid wealth mentality, and he was in my downline, and we get to his condo that night, and he said, hey, you want some ice cream? And I said, oh yeah, man, I love ice cream. But of course, coming up, we always had ice milk, okay, not ice cream. Ice milk was cheaper. It was like frozen milk. Okay. All right. No cream to it. All right. And so, he said, you want some ice cream? I was like, yeah, and so he said, well, go there. There's some in the freezer. And so I opened up his freezer, the top part of the refrigerator, and it was packed. There was nothing in there but Haagen-Dazs ice cream, pints of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. And I had looked at those in the counter at the convenience stores, and it was $1.69 for a Haagen-Dazs pint back then. And I would look at it and I would just lust after it. And then I would pick up the little Pine State iced milk for a quarter, and I opened up and I saw Haagen-Dazs. I said, Haagen-Dazs. And he goes, yeah. And he goes, get you one. I said, the whole thing? He's like, yeah. And I was like, I was in heaven. It didn't take much to please me. Believe me. Okay. I had a low dream factor. I mean, a pint of Haagen-Dazs ice cream. You got to be kidding me. Okay. This was wealth. Okay. But anyway, and so that's where we came from, and the thing is that we started growing up in the business and learning how to think. We got started in the business. I went to see the plan. Renata didn't see it that night. I went with Larry. I come home. I'm all excited. And she had this preconceived idea about Amway because we had friends that we had grown up with who had gotten started earlier, a few years earlier. And I went to a meeting. They did. But we had watched them for about 3.5 years and they hadn't accomplished anything. And they were nice people. So we just figured the business didn't work.
Much smarter than us.
Oh yeah. They were like straight A students. And I was like, just get me through this student. Okay. All right. And so the thing is I said, Renata, she knew that Larry was talking to me about the Amway business. And I was like, Renata, this is awesome. And she goes, Danny, not Amway. And I said, well, what do you know about it? She goes, I don't know that much, but what will our friends think? And I said, well, if it's something that's honest and legal and somebody doesn't like me for what I choose to do to take care of our family, then they're the one with the problem. I'll just find new friends. Right? And so she says, I don't know, Danny. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 2 weeks. You think of something better and we'll do it. And so she came to me after a few days and she says, I got it. And I said, what? She said, let's start a house cleaning business. I said, you don't even like to clean ours. Right? And I said, just go with me to a meeting. So she went to a meeting and she was like, oh, okay. And so then 2 weeks later, it was the first function, a big function. And we went to a big Coliseum function. And I was just, by this time, Larry was loading me up with audios and I was just listening to him and I was just praying, I hope this thing is for real. And she was still very skeptical. And that night, the functions would go late. And she was sitting there with her leg kicking, how cross leg, just ready to go, punching me. Let's go. And I'm like, I wouldn't even look at her. I'm like, I'm getting every drop of everything they're saying this week, And so, but by the end of the weekend, she had heard speakers and realized these are good people. This is a great business. This is legit. And then we stayed for the whole weekend. Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday morning. And by the end of the weekend, we walked out of that Coliseum and I'm telling you, I just lost it. I was crying. I put shades on. I couldn't stop. I couldn't even talk. I was just like, and she said, you okay? I'm like, and I was moved. Okay. And we went to McDonald's across the street and they're eating Big Macs and I was upset not to be diving in on the McDonald's. Okay. And I'm sitting there like, she said, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. And finally I could get it out. She said, what is the deal? And I said, I found what I know I'm supposed to do in my life. And it changed everything. Because up to that point, I wanted to do something that mattered. I mean, who wants to go through life and all you do is just trade hours for dollars until you get old and die? And I saw people's lives impacted that weekend. And we were already involved in a Christian coffee house, and I sang in a Christian band and stuff. And we were singing in jails and prisons and youth rallies and stuff like that, trying to make a difference with our life. But I saw that weekend that by building this business at Diamond, I could make more influence and impact more lives for the good than anything I could ever do. And I knew it's what we were supposed to do. And so from there, we set our course. And it didn't take off so fast. It didn't take off fast at all. In fact, I registered people, but just couldn't get traction. Couldn't get it going. And maybe it's me. Maybe it's the quality of people that we talk to. A lot of factors there, but we just couldn't get traction. But we were willing to do anything. You got anything? And so what I would do is, I want her to talk too, but I don't want to just monopolize time. But one of the things I would do is I would put marks on my mirror. And I think it's so important to keep your goals in front of you. And I would put little ticky marks on the mirror that I wanted to show it to 20 people a month. And every night that I would come home, I would wipe one of those marks off the mirror. And it just kept me on track, because halfway through the month, if half of them weren't gone, I knew I got to step it up by the end of the month. And so I had a monthly goal for me, because I couldn't see diamond. The diamonds were beyond what I could even imagine. I remember going to a function. We had been in 2.5 years and went to a function, and I walked up to the front where they had the little section like this with the curtains and stuff, and I saw an emerald and a diamond. And here's where my self-image was. After 2.5 years in the business, I walked up and I said, "Sir, do you mind if I take a picture of you?" Not, can I take a picture with you? I was asking, can I take a picture of you? And they're like, yeah, and I took the picture, and then I put it on my mirror in my bathroom. And I had those 20 marks up there on the mirror, and I had that picture I took of an emerald and diamond that I loved listening to in the business. And on the bottom of my mirror, I wrote, "Don't get weary in well doing, for in due time, in due season, you'll reap the harvest if you faint not." And that was what gave me strength, because I knew that was a promise. And I said, I'm just going to believe my due season is coming. And we didn't let up. We did some crazy, stupid things. One night, I contacted a guy, and his name was, it was Withers or something like that, okay? And so I got directions to the house and everything. And we go down this cul-de-sac. We got a babysitter for Stephanie, and Renata goes with me. We're going to do at the house, do a one-on-one. Go to the door, and I knock on the door, and a guy comes to the door. And I said, "What do you say? How you doing tonight?" And I just walked right in, because I was contacting so many people. I didn't remember faces and names. I just had a list of names. I just walked right in. The guy's like looking at me, and we walked. I said, "Why don't y'all sit right here, and I'll sit right here." I walk into their dining room table, and I'm telling them where to sit in their house. Okay, all right. And Renata's just walking in. She's just quiet little Renata, just walking in. She sits down, and I start spinning the circles, man, showing him the plan. And finally, he looks at me, and goes, "Who are you?" And I said, "Aren't you Withers," or whatever it was? He goes, "We're Witherspoon. Withers is 2 doors down." And so we walked in the house and just barged in and started showing the plan to a guy, that he was like, him and his wife were sitting there listening. And
they had just had a baby, just come home from the hospital, and they let us in their house.
Yeah. I just took that as a good opportunity to say, here's the way you can have a future for your baby. Okay. All right. So anyway, so we walk out of the house. Renata is so embarrassed. I'm like, "Hey, I just got another plan out there. I was just trying to get marks off the mirror, and so we went 2 doors down to Witherspoon or whatever it was. And there, we knock on the door, and the house is dark, but I could hear people in there rustling around. Okay. So they knew we were coming, but they weren't going to answer the door. And so I just start beating the door like I can hear you in there. Okay, let's come on, And so that'll give you hope, because we were that stupid, but we wouldn't give up. We didn't do everything right. We did so much wrong, but here's what we did. We would learn through that. See, coming through school, I was always taught, just pass the test, pass the grade, and you'll make it. I had never been taught success. Success is learned through failure. They didn't teach me in school to fail and then you'll succeed. They taught me pass the test and you'll succeed. So I was always looking for shortcuts to pass the test, because I thought if you got the grade, that's good, right? And so I would cheat. I would look at other people's papers. I would do whatever, I would cut deals. My baseball coach, my basketball coach was friends with the algebra teacher. And so we got a thing going where he was friends with him, and he told him, he said, if you'll just pass Danny through algebra, he said, then he can still play ball. And so what I became was the field crew for the baseball team. During algebra class, I would go out and line the field for the baseball team that day, and I had a pass to get out of class, and I passed, right? And I thought, as long as you got a grade, good deal, you're getting by. My Spanish teacher in high school, She was young, probably 1 year out of college, young girl, smart lady. You know, here I am, 15 years old, 16 years old, and she would wear these tight pants, and she'd be up there on the board, and she'd be writing, and her butt would jiggle, you know, and I'm in the back of the class going, right, okay, like I would have known what to do at 15 years old, okay, you know. But everybody in the class would start laughing, and she would start laughing, and her butt would just jiggle that much more, you know. And so finally she said, Danny, come see me after class. So I go up there, and she goes, Danny, listen, you got to quit disrupting things. And at that time, I was failing Spanish. And she said, I said, well, listen, I said, I've never failed a subject in my life. I said, if you'll just pass me through this, I promise I won't take Spanish 2. And she said, promise? And I went, yes. She said, well, you be quiet and don't disrupt things. I'll get you through here. I was like, deal. And so at the end of the year, they had the final exam. And I wish I had learned Spanish now because, I mean, so many friends of ours are Spanish, and so they speak. But you didn't know back then, okay? And so it said, illustrate these sentences in Spanish. And it would say, see Jack run. I said, I can illustrate that. I drew a picture of a little dude with a sombrero on running. All right? Passed. See? And I just thought that was the way you got ahead. Okay, find the shortcut, get a good grade, you're out. I didn't learn that success is through failure until I got in the business. Because when you fail forward. You get up and you go, not going to do that again. And then you fail and you get up again and you go, not going to do that again. And our business, 4.5 years of building it, 20 times a month, showing the plan. And we were at 1900 PV. We never missed a function. I listened to every audio that came out. We bought every book that was promoted, but that was one of the big holdups. I didn't read them. I would read the first chapter, put it down, because I didn't read coming through school, so why am I going to read now? I just figured you can just shortcut the system if you show enough plans. But see, I wasn't growing personally to the extent that I would be able to lead a group if I'd had one. And so I could do the work. I was a worker, but I wasn't doing anything for self-development. I was still trying to shortcut everything. And after 4.5 years, I just got real frustrated because now it was getting ugly. I was like, this is just other people I've listened to on audios have gone diamond in 4.5 years, and we're at 1900 PV. And so they talked about a book by Shad Helmstetter, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And I read that, and it was a scientific thing about the words you say and what it can do. And then I got another book that backed it up with scripture, and it clicked for me. And I wrote goal cards for the first time in my life after 4.5 years. And I put affirmations on there. Like, I walk like a ruby, talk like a ruby, think like a ruby. I'm a ruby making $5,000 a month in Manway business. And you got to realize now, we were at 1900 PV. And about 1,100 of that was in our first leg. But what happened as I started reading these goal cards, what happened is it started changing my image of myself. And I'll talk about this more tomorrow because this is the key that put us over and has kept us over for a victorious life, understanding the power of words. And so I read these goal cards, and all of a sudden I started seeing myself as a success. I wasn't going in and telling people I was making $5,000 a month because I wasn't. But I just had the aura of success and knew where I was going, and people wanted to hitch their wagon up to it.
Expectation.
I had expectation because now it was not cross your fingers and hope this was going to work. What had happened was I learned what faith was, that we walk by faith and not by sight. And I started understanding that, I'd heard all my life, I'll believe it when I see it. And that's why people stay where they're at, because they won't step out on faith. And I want to talk to them tomorrow about focused faith and what it can do in your life and the power of your words, because it's our story. We have nothing, we weren't the smartest, sharpest, educated, nothing going for us, except I learned these principles and it changed our life. And it not only changed our life, it's changed our family for generations. Dr. Caroline Leaf, she studied the brain and all. She's got a book called Switch On the Brain. And she talked about that every night your brain produces 3 million new brain cells. and they're waiting each morning when you wake up. There are fluids that go around these cells, and what you do first thing in the morning programs these cells as to what you want to accomplish that day. And what do most people do today? They pick up their cell phone, and they'll look at their calendar, they'll look at Instagram, they'll look at see messages, they'll check email, and all of a sudden they start their brain off their day just bouncing all over the map. You know why? Because, well, the thing is we need to have a mission and a vision in our life that when we go to bed, we think about it, and we wake up, we think about it. And it's the most dominant thought in our life because that's how we move forward in life. And most people have never been taught this. I was only taught this through the business and the books, and finally started reading, and our life started changing. And that's what this business is all about. It's not just about products and money. It's about building your life on a foundation that can make a difference for you and to generations. And she said our brain will take in 400 billion images and thoughts through our ears, through our nose, through our eyes, just each moment. She said, but it can only zero in on about 2,000 of them. She said, but if we don't act on those images that are in our mind within 24 to 48 hours, they just dissipate. And that's why I was wondering why people could come to functions and get so fired up, but then by Wednesday, they're right back where they were. It's because they didn't take actions on what they thought. And maybe I can talk about that a little bit more tomorrow too, because you have the power to change your future. And I believe that's the way God created us, because He wants us to move forward. Every day we have put before us life and death. And it's a matter of us choosing these things, and it makes a difference even to our children for generations to come, because she talks about in this book that when you make the right decisions over a 21-day period of time, you can start changing right down to the DNA level, and that actually starts changing your children and the DNA in them for generations. Why is the lineage of the Victor organization or the Victor family so successful? Why are they so on track? Why are Steve and Joe so on track? Because the mindset that was passed on from Joe Victor to Jody Victor, now to his sons, that mindset is in their DNA. And you can change things in your lineage, in your family, in your grandchildren by the thoughts that you take now and the things you do. And that's the way God created us. I'm not saying some woo weirdo stuff. It's the way we're wired. It's the way we're wired. Think about this. When you're married to someone, she can start a sentence and I can finish, or vice versa. We can even be apart from each other and call each other and say, hey, I was just thinking about something. She goes, I was too. And she talks about there's a reason for that, because there's an electronic field that goes out into the world. How do you see a television in a signal shot and you don't know how it works? How do you figure out I'm talking in this mic and y'all are hearing me? How can you even explain that I can say something and your ear hears it and understands it as quick as I can say it? You are a miracle. You have seeds of greatness in you. You can do anything. But what we do is we limit our mind to what our past was, what we've been taught, what we've learned, and what we haven't educated ourselves to do. And I just want to give you hope tonight. I'm just thankful that, we're about out of time now, but we'll tell more of our story tomorrow and tomorrow night. And you'll understand what we're talking about, that if we've made it, you can. Because we're a perfect testimony of it. We don't have any lineage of success in our family. We've got a lineage of great people, good people, but they were just average thinkers. And this business and this association and this team changed our life. That's why those books out there that they have for sale and the audios they're not just something to listen to and entertain you. They can change your life. Because if you change your thoughts, you change your future. Change your words, and it really establishes your thoughts. And so we're about out of time, but here's the thing. Here's what changed. When these things fell into place, after 4.5 years, we were at 1900 PV. When I wrote the goal cards and started speaking them, and my image of myself changed, and my image of everything changed, here's what happened. And I'm not saying, both of us were doing it, because we're a team all the way through. All right. So when I say me, it's us. We're one. All right. 4.5 months later, we started platinum qualification. We had tried for 4.5 years, as hard as we could work it in our own power. We changed our words. We changed our image. And 4.5 months later, we started platinum qualification. And we've never missed a month of platinum qualification now since 1988. Okay? Not only did we hit platinum in 88, okay, then we went ruby in 89. Remember my gold cards? I'm a ruby. I walk like a ruby, think like a ruby, talk like a ruby. I am a ruby, making $5,000 a month in my business. Okay, that was on my gold cards. I'd read them all the time. Just had them stuck in my pocket. I'd pull them out, read them at stoplights, read them. In fact, I had them memorized to the point I didn't have to read them, but I would still pull them out so I could see them through my eye gate as well as hearing it through my ear gate. And so I just wanted to magnify what our goals were and stay on it. And here's what happened. We went platinum in 88. We went ruby in 89. We went double ruby in 90. Okay. And this is
Founders. Founders
ruby every month, 12 out of 12. Okay. Double ruby, 12 out of 12. And then here's the power of words. I had not clicked to the point of diamond at that point. We were just rubies. I wanted to break platinums, but I was like, we're rubies. I was so stupid, I was still confessing rubies and we were already there. And so we just got ruby, bigger ruby, double ruby, eternal ruby. It was like, okay, enough, all right? And finally, we were at a leadership like this, and I would always write on the top of my little page, my legs up there, and it hit me. We had 4,000 legs. And I was like, man, 3,500 more PV in these legs, and we're diamonds. And here's what happened. The speed of the group's always turned by the speed of the leader. As dumb as I was, my group was even dumber. Because none of them had figured they could go platinum. They were just proud to be on Danny Ronaldo's Ruby team. And that weekend I said, we're going diamond this year. And they're like, you are? And I was like, yep, because you're going to be one of the platinums. And they're like, I am? And I'm like, yep, all we got to get is 3,500 PV. And here's what, because I had faith, they hitched onto my faith and they started speaking and believing it. And we had 7 legs go over. Well, we went emerald in 91. We had 5 legs go. We had never broken a silver until in 91 we broke 5. The first month we ever broke a silver, 5 different legs. 3 of them held, but we were speaking diamond. We qualified emerald. The next month we started diamond qualification with 7 legs. 6 of them held, but we had ruby volume outside of that. And so we went emerald in 91, we went diamond in 92, and we went EDC. We had 3 more go over in 93. So we went platinum, ruby, double ruby, emerald, diamond, EDC 5 years straight. 5 years it took us to go, thank you, but here, thank the Lord. 5 years it took us to go silver. And the next 5 years we were qualified EDCs. What changed? What changed? I was working hard prior. What changed? My words and my mind. My words and my mind. And that's how critical. Sometimes we just brush over it. I heard guys saying, you're snared by the words of your mouth. And I was like, yeah. Just show me a better approach. I was always looking for the quick, slick thing like I was trying to get through high school with. Just pass the test and you'll make it. I was looking for the next approach. I was looking for this. I was looking for some technique that was going to put it over. And it was all in my mouth and in my brain. And I'm telling you, I'm excited about tomorrow because I can't wait to just share this with you, because I don't care if you're brand new or if you've been in this thing forever. This weekend, I want you to walk out of here with a new mindset, with a new vision and a purpose, and realize it's never too late to succeed. And it'll extend your years, and it will be awesome. I just turned 61, and I'm believing for 120. And you may say, well, that's crazy. But here's the thing. Everything that you step out on faith and speak, people are going to say, you're crazy, until you accomplish it. And then they look back and go, man, that was a bold leap of faith. See? And I'm just telling you this weekend, let's have some crazy faith come out of here. that you can accomplish things, that all things are possible, that you're going to walk out those doors at the end of this weekend and it's fresh start, baby. We're on it, we're getting it done, and we're going to see growth like never before, and lives and by the thousands and for generations will be changed because of what you can do out here this weekend. So we look forward to tomorrow and sharing with you. It's been our honor tonight. So.
This is a copyrighted program of Legacy Leadership Collective, powered by Marker Man Productions, affiliated with MarkerNet Incorporated. Duplication of this program is strictly